Hi everybody, today we're going to talk about volumes of cones. We're still in chapter 11.7 of our textbook. Yesterday we looked at how to find the surface area of a cone, and today the objective is to find the volume of a cone. So, how many cones do you think it would take to fill up a cylinder given the same height and radius? So if you look here, there is a cone that is just placed inside this cylinder, and the cone has the same height as the cylinder and it has the same base area. So as you can see, the cone clearly takes up less space than that cylinder. So again, the question is, how many cones will it take to match the volume of that cylinder? Okay, so here's another way to visualize it. I have the figures side by side. So both of these shapes have the same radius. Okay, they both have the same radius, and both shapes are the exact same height. So what we're going to do right now is I want you to take a guess. Maybe you think it's the volume of 2 cones that's equal to the volume of 1 cylinder. Or maybe you think it's 2.5 cones to 1 cylinder, or maybe you think it's 3 cones to 1 cylinder. Whatever it may be, just make a guess, and we're going to watch a short video that's going to show this relationship here. Alright, so I hope you have your guess already. So we're going to leave here for a moment, and we're going to take a look at a YouTube video here. I will also post the link for this gentleman here. Please support Mr. Kyle Pierce, whoever this is. Let's take a quick look at the video here. So as you can see, he pours some water into the cone. So that's 1 cone. And here comes the second cone. And hopefully you notice we're not quite at the top. So here comes the third cone. And what do you know? 3 cones equates to 1 cylinder. So that is going to take us to our formula for the day. So you learned last week that the volume of a cylinder, write that down here somewhere. You learned that the volume of a cylinder, I'll just write CYL, is equal to pi times r squared times height. And as the video illustrated, it takes 3 cones to give you the same volume that a cylinder does. Therefore, the volume of a cone is 1/3 pi r squared times height. Another alternative formula that I really like to use is pi r squared times height, all divided by 3. Both of these is fine. This one I like because it just emphasizes the fact that it's, there's three cones here that equate to 1 cylinder, but both of them are pretty much saying the same thing. 1/3 or all divided by 3 is the same exact thing. Use whichever formula you prefer. All right, and this volume formula also applies to what are called oblique cones. So these are oblique cones, and that volume formula applies to this just as it does to these right cones. This is a right cone. One thing to keep in mind, the surface area formula from yesterday only applies to right cones. Okay, so you may have noticed we did not look at oblique cones yesterday because the surface area formula doesn't quite work. But volume, on the other hand, works whether you have a right cone or an oblique cone. Alright, so let's try a problem out here. So we're going to find the volume of this cone. And like I said, that volume formula applies to both right cones and oblique cones. And we're going to round to the nearest hundredths place here. So here's our formula. 1/3 pi times r squared times height. So as you can see here, we have our radius, it's 2.2, and our height here from the very top of the vertex straight down, makes a 90-degree angle here, is 4.5. And we are going to get approximately 22.81 centimeters cubed, or cubic centimeters. Remember, volume is measured in cubic units. So as we're switching back from surface area to volume, make sure your units, make sure you have the appropriate units. And again, if you wanted to write this out as pi times 2.2 squared, let me put parentheses around here because when I'm writing this out, sometimes those decimal points can look like multiplication signs. Pi r squared times height, you can find that number and divide all of this by 3, and you will get the same answer that you would with this formula here, 1/3 pi r squared times height. All right, so here's a couple of problems here. One oblique cone and one right cone. We're going to find the volume of each and round to the nearest hundredth. So pause the video, give these problems a try, and check back when you're ready. All right, so here come the solutions for these two problems. Here we go. So here we have 1/3 pi times the radius, which is 7, 1/3 pi r squared times 13, and that will give us 167.06 cubic inches. And here we have 1/3 pi times 10 squared times 13, and this gives us 1,361.36 cubic millimeters. That's our volume measurements for both problems. All right, so let's make it a little more interesting here. So just as we did yesterday, we are going to now have to use the Pythagorean theorem, because you may notice here we are not given the height, we are given the slant height. So you have to look at the placement of the number. So that 15 you can see is just clearly placed right here, right on the slanted portion of the cone. This arrow here, or this little arc, is pointing at the true height of the cone. And here you have the radius of the cone. All right, so we're going to start off with the Pythagorean theorem. So plugging in the 9 here, 9 squared, a squared plus b would be our h, and the slant height would be our c squared. And you're going to notice we get a nice whole number of 12. And remember that 9, 12, 15 is a Pythagorean triple. So if you ever notice a triple right off the bat, you don't have to show all this work. The 9, 12, 15 is created from the 3, 4, 5. Oops, sorry, 9, 12, 15 is created from this 3, 4, 5 triple that you are very well aware of just by multiplying each number by 3. So you just have to remember that the 12 is the height. All right, so now we know our height, and now we're ready to solve for the volume. So there's a big 12 right here. So 1/3 pi times r squared times height. So the r is 9, the h is 12. Okay, so now you're going to see something that I did here. I want you to be aware of this. Okay, I want you to always just figure out what these values are. 9 squared times 12 is 972. This is 972 pi. And that number is divisible by 3, because 972 times 1/3 or divided by 3 gives you 324. So if this number is a whole number and not some really ugly, funky decimal, I want you to write it like so. So 324 pi cubic inches, that's our exact answer as we've discussed before. This is an exact value. And down here we get our approximate value, which is 1,017.88 cubic inches. I skipped this portion in the last few problems of that first example and the first think pair share because we didn't get any nice whole number here. And Quite often you won't because you're dividing by 3, so not every number is divisible by 3. But just check and make sure. If it works out, great. If not, just jump straight to the approximate answer and round to the nearest hundredths place. All right. So here is another problem for you to try out. Find the volume of the cone. Again, notice you're given the slant height and not the regular height. Pause the video and please give it a try and check back when you are ready. All right, so here is our Pythagorean theorem. You'll notice that our radius, it's plugged in here. The height is our b, and our slant height is our c. So 25 and 64 here, we're going to subtract 25 from each side. Subtract 25, and h squared is equal to 39. And then I'm going to take the square root of each side, and I only want the positive square root because we're dealing with lengths here. And we're going to get a height of about 6.244997998. As I've mentioned before, you can leave the height as radical 39 temporarily. So if you want to plug this in as your height, that will prevent you from having to round anything and making any rounding errors, because if you do decide to round this and round too early and make it 6.2, your final answer is going to be noticeably different from mine. So if you want to be safe, go with radical 39 or just type this whole entire value out in your calculator, whatever is easier. All right, so 1/3 pi times r squared, which is 5, times this number here, which again is radical 39. You can use radical 39 just as well as 6.244997998. Okay, and because this value is, it's an irrational number, it's not going to be a nice clean decimal, we're not even going to worry about getting the exact value. We're just going to go straight to the approximate. And this comes out to be 163.49 cubic meters. Again, you can write it out like this. Pi r squared times height all over 3. Okay, there's a lot of ways you can input this in your calculator. This is one way. You can group all this together, divide it by 3. Or if you're typing it in with the 1/3, you can group this. You can say 1 divided by 3 and put that in parentheses, and then type in pi times 5 squared times radical 39, or 6.244997998. But this should be your answer. And again, rounding can cause some differences. You may not get this exact number if you round. As long as you're in the ballpark here, if you do round to 6.24 and you don't quite get this, that's not a big deal. All right, one last problem here, a little bit of algebra. An ice cream cone has a base radius of 2.1 centimeters and a volume of 56.4. We're going to find the height. So notice we're going to use our answer here, and we're going to go backwards a little bit. So I was going to go step by step, but I have all the work here, so I'll just walk you through it. You're going to plug in the volume. You're going to plug in your radius. All right, so now what I did here is I simplified. I'm going to simplify this r squared value, and to get rid of that fraction, we're going to multiply both sides by 3. So multiplying 3 to this side and 3 to this side will cancel that out. Okay, so you substitute your values of v and r. Then we're going to multiply by 3 to get rid of that 1/3 fraction. That gives us 169.2. And here I just reorganized my terms and I wrote 4.41 pi times h. All right, now I'm going to divide. Remember, 4.41 times pi is some number. I'm going to divide both sides by this number. And you're probably going to want to group this together, or else your calculator is going to do something that you don't intend it to do. So 4.41 pi. So type in 169.2 divided by 4.41 pi, and you should end up with approximately 12.21 centimeters for your height. you could plug that back into this formula just to check and make sure you did everything correctly. All right, that's about it. Have a great day, everyone.